I'm in desperate need of turbos for my mid-engine left truck project. The only thing is that I have no clue what size I should be running. So I'm gonna head over to Force Performance Turbochargers in Van Alstyne, Texas, and talk to them about their lineup and see what they say I should be running for my specific application. And I might just pick some up today, who knows? So I'm sitting here with Robert Young, the owner of Force Performance Turbochargers, and figured he can kind of tell you guys about the company, what they do, how long they've been in business, stuff like that.
So yeah, I'm Robert, and we've been building turbochargers for about the last 30 years, and Xona Rotor's been about the last 10 years of that. And the Xona Rotor is really born out of the desire to have some turbochargers that were exactly like we wanted instead of kind of like we wanted. So we built turbochargers that had the pressure ratio characteristics we were looking for, had the super alloy characteristics we were looking for, non-corrosion. We developed that variable preload feature within the bearings. So as the turbocharger shaft speed goes up, engine oil pressure goes up with engine RPM. So you end up increasing the preload on the angular contact bearings, and this helps with bearing longevity because the bearings are lightly preloaded at low speed, which they need to be, and more heavily preloaded at high speed, which they need to be. So that was one of the key features of the Xona Rotor turbos we first developed, along with the huge water jacket in the on the turbine side. It's really a whole pancake underneath the heat shield is total water. If you look at a cross-sectional diagram of that, and there's some on the Xona website, you'll see how big that water jacket is. So the intention there is that you could operate a turbocharger at its indicated max shaft speed and flow rate indefinitely, like as if you were in an airplane or a boat. You could set it to that point, that operating point, and you can just sit there. It's not like it's only able to tolerate an instantaneous blast up and then blast down. So as much as we all love drag racing, and that's how we all got here, the turbochargers were designed with a higher bar in mind to just have steady state motorsports type of performance out of them. So and that's kind of what you're going to end up with.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because and I think this is the first time that I'm actually announcing, like what the engine combination will be. But so I'm going to be running a Gen 4 aluminum 5.3. It's been bored a little bit, but I'll run a SCAT rotating assembly. So they're crankshaft and rods, Race Tech pistons, AFR heads, like a 210cc head, and then total seal piston rings, of course. But it's going to be a pretty, I guess, mild combination. I want it to live at around 750, typically. I want to be able to make 1,000 horsepower, obviously, because that's what all the cool kids do.
Like 1,000 horsepower on scramble or an exhibition mode or something like that.
Yeah, like a push to pass button. But yeah, so primarily it will be, a pretty basic, 5.3 that will get ran for typically 10 to 20 minutes, depending on what event I'm at.
Track session you're having. So, and that's where that water jacket comes into play. You have steady state, 700 to 1,000 or more horsepower operation. You have a lot of heat to get rid of, and you have a lot of temperature to deal with in the turbocharger, and the water jackets really make a big difference when it comes to that. As well as the alloys that bearing housing is made out of. The turbine wheel is made out of very nice alloy exhaust housings. All those things are made out of alloys that are specifically for really, really high temperatures.
Okay, cool.
So, you're set there.
Yeah.
As far as the sizing of it, the horsepower and the RPM, we kind of need to talk about the RPM range that you're going to operate the engine at. So it being a manual transmission, or sort of manual transmission.
Yeah, sequential.
You don't run into a whole lot of transmissions like this.
Yeah.
But being that it is manual, you're going to probably have a tendency to click gears a lot. It's not like having a power glide. It's a lot different. So it's not that we need it to come on, and then once we got it on, we're waiting for bulbs to come down, and we got it lit and everything, and we're good to go, and we do a pass. You're totally the opposite of that. You're going to want to light it up off and on and over again, the same way like a drift guy would. And you're going to want that kind of tip in response. So we need to look at the RPM range that you want to operate the motor at, and then we need to pick the turbine wheels and the turbine housings to fit that, and then we'll pick the compressor section based on how do we put you right in the fat middle part of a compressor map with the best efficiency when you're at your operating points.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily want to put you where you know you're running all the way to choke flow all the time with the highest shaft speeds and the lower efficiencies that happen near choke flow. We want to put you in the middle of the compressor map where we are generating the least amount of charge air temperature and having the best efficiency of power production or compression for the compression for the compressor, and use the least amount of power off the turbo wheel as we can. So that we want to match the two sides together, both in RPM and flow rate, and then we want to pick the turbine blade size and turbine housing based on when you need the power to come on your engine. So as far as the power band that you're interested in, you're going to need to give me like a low speed where you want some response, and then an RPM where you definitely need it to be super responsive, and then a max RPM. So you kind of, you know, is that like, I need some response at 3,000, I need very response above 4,000, and then I have a max RPM limit of 6,900 or whatever you have. So.
It's really funny you say that, because as you were talking, I was like 357, you know, have it come in around 3, you know, have a little bit for the autocross stuff, but then, you know, when it's full tilt 5, and then I don't think that I'll be really revving it over, you know, 7 to 7,500.
I think reliability on the LS, you know, is best below 7,000.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
you go with some shaft-mounted rockers or something like that, and you can get, and as long as your spring package matches the camshaft, you'll have some pretty good reliability there in the cylinder heads. So, okay, so with this in mind, so we have a 5.3 that we want it to run, and we want the best power band to be between 5 and 7,000 RPM. That's a lot of RPM. We're going to need a lot of turbine flow so that we're not becoming a restriction in that range. Okay, so a 5.3 is basically like, you know, 2.7 liter 6 cylinders, or a pair of really big 5 cylinders or something like that. So we're not messing around here. That's, even though 5.3 by LS standard is kind of a small motor, it's not a small motor necessarily when it comes to, you know, turbos in general. That's plenty of motor to do a lot of work with. Yeah. So I would say we want to probably use something. We could maybe use the 57S turbine wheel, but if we want the 1,000 plus exhibition power level as an option, or as an overtake option, then I think we can, since we have such a big motor, that we can move up to the 64S, and we'll just put a smaller turbine housing on it. So I want to use the 64S turbine wheel. That's the UHF turbine wheel, which is a proprietary Xona rotor product that has been very, very useful over the last couple of years. And as we've been running the UHF after the last couple of years, we're starting to realize how to best speed match it with compressors, and make compressors, revised compressors, that take full advantage of what the UHF can do as far as the way it delivers power, what shaft speed it delivers power at, what pressure expansion ratio it delivers power at, and make rotor groups that are really well matched. Okay, so almost, instead of I used to just say how much power we're going to make, so we need 1,000 horsepower. Well, you make 10 horsepower per pound a minute, so we unit flow 100 pounds a minute, so we need 250 pound a minute turbochargers. That's like phase 1 of turbo sizing. Okay, that's like, I have a napkin and a Sharpie, and I'm going to do some math. Okay, so that's your level 1 approximation. Okay, beyond that, you really need to get into, how am I driving it? What shaft speed am I really going to want to move this air at? You want to make sure both sides work together at that operating point. And that's where we're finding the big gains these days. Not just with a better compressor or with a better turbine, but with a better rotor group that works best together, so that the compressor side is speed matched with the turbine side. So where we have good performance from the turbine, we also have really good performance from the compressor. So so that said, we're going to start with a 64S turbine wheel and shaft. So that's the hot side. Okay, so that's the turbine side. Okay, so if we get into the nomenclature of things, they all have XR at the front. We're going to use XRC wheels, because the C is a combination of the middle of the map and the high end of the map. You're not really going to be on the low end of the map any more than, you're probably going to turn it down to maybe 1 bar pressure at some times. 1 bar pressure on that motor is probably going to make something like, you know, 600 horsepower, I would say something like 600 horsepower, really easy at a bar. And at 1 bar of boost pressure, we're not even going to make a bar back pressure with the turbine sections that I'm going to put on it. So we're going to put 64S turbine side on it. We're going to put the 63AR tile V-band exhaust housings on it, and that's how we're going to get this real direct connection between the pedal and the boost gauge, between the pedal and the torque to drive the truck with. I really like the way your truck's set up. You know, the Love truck with the mid-engine, with the transaxle. You don't see that very often. That was one of the things that drew me to the project, you know, right off the bat, was just how unique and eye-catching it was, just in its totality. So that's kind of when we started talking, was I started seeing the pictures of that truck, and I was like, yeah, that's really neat. You know, I just had to say, hey, I think I sent you a message and said, hey, that's really cool. You know, and we started talking after that. So anyway, so we're going to go with the 63 turbine AR. We're going to 64S turbine wheel, and on the compressor sides, we're gonna look at this compressor map that I have here. That this is, I think, I expected this would probably work out to be one of the better choices, which would be the 86 HTC compressor, which has a 62 millimeter inducer on it. So that would make this in the Xona Rotor lineup, this new for 2024 lineup, this would make this an XRC 6264S. We're going to use an X3C cover. That's the larger cover of the two that are possible with that. You can run an X2C or an X3C cover with that. We could also run an X4C on it, but you know, for packaging and space constraints, it can become a little bit cumbersome. You know, and I think the mock-ups that you were using, those were X3Cs, and you were able to find real estate to park those and everything. So
yeah, they were a really good size, and I know that you said that, you know, those really stay light. And a big thing with the truck, obviously, because it is such a light truck, which hopefully at the end will be around 23 to 2,400 pounds. You know, making sure that I'm not doing some crazy big turbo just because it looks cool, because I need to obviously think about weight.
Yes, and these turbos are really light. The new Xona Rotor bearing housing, the new investment cast bearing housing that we moved to after the billet one last year, that's, I forget the number, but it saves, I think, a pound or a pound and a half off the bearing housing of the turbocharger, while maintaining the same volume of water in the water jacket. So that's a cool feature. There's not lighter housings than the tile V-band housings for that application, and those are all thick wall castings, so that they're safe. They're actually, you know, built with containment in mind.
Yeah.
You know, people go, oh, well, you know, you only have to worry about that if you have a bad turbo. No, you can spin, you can have an accident occur. You can have a vacuum line become melted. You can have a wastegate stick. You can have a charge pipe come off. You can do a number of things that can result in really high shaft speeds. And you, in many of the circumstances that it can occur, you as an operator have almost no idea that it's happening until you hear a boom. You know, you know, you think, oh well, a charge pipe just came off, and then you go look, and you've actually got a casting with some, you know, it's broken. You know, because stuff exploded. I'll show you an example of a tile turbine housing that had an accident like that, and all the parts stayed inside the turbine housing.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, due to the fact that the turbine housing is designed with containment in mind. You know, you see some companies these days that take advantage of really low-cost iron exhaust housings, and they'll make copies of stainless V-band housings that are made with the proper strength in mind, but then they copy the housing in cast iron. Well, cast iron doesn't even have 30% of the strength that the stainless steel alloys that used for turbine housings have at elevated temperature. So people running V-band housings that have the iron exhaust housings on them really almost have no hope of containing a turbine wheel if it were to explode. Maybe a piece of your valve guide comes out. Maybe a wastegate sticks, or a line comes off and the turbo goes to the moon as far as shaft speed goes. Anything that spins in a circle spins around has a limit to how fast it can spin before it explodes. Have you ever seen them do experiments with CD-ROM drives?
No.
I've seen guys hook, I don't know where, it's Mythbusters or something, but you put a CD-ROM in a drive, and if you double the speed that the CD normally runs at, well, somewhere in there they start to just explode,
God.
just because the centrifugal force of
Yeah.
pulling the wheel apart.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the forces that we deal with in a turbocharger too, but we also deal with fire and pressure at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a really challenging thing, and people sometimes tell me their turbo broke, and I'm like, okay, what do you want to send it in? Or like, well, I can't believe it broke, and aren't you surprised it broke? And I'm like, I'm not surprised it broke. It's a pressure vessel with 40 or 50 psi inside of it. It's glowing red. It's spinning at 160 or 190,000 RPM. It's almost amazing when they don't break.
Yeah.
It's really you're walking a fine line of operating it in the best way and then operating it in the worst way. It's really a cliff. You go right up to the edge of it and you're operating the best way, and then all of a sudden, boom, you just operated it in the worst way, and it's gone.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to bag on PTE for having turbos that explode or whatnot. I never jumped on the bandwagon of that, because I know what people do with drag race turbochargers.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, all of the sanctioning bodies try to use the turbo to simplify their work. They use the turbo as the power limiter. Well, what does that mean that happens to turbos? So if you've got a class where the limit is 68 millimeter, but the cars are supposed to make 1,600 horsepower, what do we do?
They're turning it way too high.
They're way past
Yeah.
any design point that was considered, and this is where the safety comes in. So, and so back to what we're doing, we're going to use high strength stainless alloy exhaust housings, and at the same time very lightweight. So let's go back over to your search for power. We had 750 wheel horsepower and 1,000 wheel horsepower that we really kind of wanted to look at. So what's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of assumptions about how we're going to operate the motor. So we're going to operate probably at a 2-to-1 pressure ratio when we're at low power mode. This will be a 2-to-1 pressure ratio. Means there's 1 bar of pressure, ambient pressure at the compressor housing inlet, and there's 2 bars of pressure absolute at the compressor housing outlet. So that meant if you had a boost gauge, what you would see at the compressor outlet would be 14.5 pounds of boost. Okay, that would be a 2-to-1 pressure ratio. Similarly, a 3-to-1 pressure ratio ends up being 29 or 30 pounds of boost. So if we consider that we're going to basically operate in this 2 to 3 to maybe 3.5 to 1 pressure ratio, we realize that band really kind of goes through the meat of this turbocharger right here. Okay, so as we break it down, what are the limitations of that meat? They're basically here with the surge line. We can't operate over here. The compressors won't stably pump air at that high of a pressure ratio and that low of a flow rate. So we're not going to operate there, and we don't really want to operate over here. If we can help it, we want to not operate below 70% compressor efficiency if we can help it. So really, this is the part of the compressor map that we're interested in using for your truck. Okay, so this means that at 2-to-1 pressure ratio, we can flow all the way out here to about 50 pounds a minute, 55 pounds a minute of airflow. So even at a 2-to-1 air ratio, we have, if the V of the motor is good enough to get that air to go through the motor at that low of a pressure ratio, we have the ability to make over 1,000 horsepower. Okay, but we don't have 4 valve heads. Okay, we don't have individual throttle bodies that are just all tuned. It's not a Hayabusa. You know what I mean? So it's an LS, and it's going to have some sort of nice intake manifold on it. Probably Hiram or something. Hiram. Okay, so kind of close to that. So we are getting a really good VE on, as good as you're going to get on one of these. And with the PRC 210cc heads, that's a good step. You do have a 5.3, so you got a small bore, so you're not running one of the big 2.1 or larger intake valves. So that's going to get in your way a little bit, but really not. Okay, because what are we talking about? That's the 2-to-1 pressure ratio line. Okay, all the good stuff that we're looking for can happen. We have a lot more high pressure ratio parts of the map above that. So we look at what's going to happen when we run a 3-to-1 pressure ratio, so 30 psi boost. We actually have the ability to operate all the way out to 70 pounds a minute or so. Okay, at 29 or 30 pounds of boost. Okay, so we are oversizing it a little bit, but like I said before, we don't really want to put you over here. We want to put you in the middle of it. Okay, so where's the middle of it? At a 3-to-1 pressure ratio, and 55 pounds a minute, we're operating right here. Okay, so at 30 pounds of boost, very easy to flow 55 pounds a minute, very easy to make 1100 horsepower to the tires,
okay,
or your hubs, however you want to measure it.
Yeah.
You know, so this is why I would pick this compressor, and the engine that you have is going to inhale air very well. Okay, so we're not going to have to worry about the surge part of it, because we're going to come into the high mass flow part of the map really quickly. Okay, we could pick a smaller compressor than this. We could go down a little bit, but what ends up happening is our operating point ends up shifting further and further over. As the wheel gets smaller, this operating point ends up moving further and further into the lower efficiency part of the map. So, you know, this is really what I predict is going to work best for you, is a X3C covers with XRC 6264S supercores with 63 AR turbine housings. I think that's going to give you the best throttle response, tip in. It's going to give you that response at 3K, and it's also going to have enough turbine in it to not get in the way when we're flowing 50 pounds or 55 pounds a minute per turbo at 7,000 RPM at 30 PSI. And if it takes more than 30 PSI to get that air to go through the motor, let's look back at the map. Look at, if it takes more boost than that, say it takes 38 pounds of boost, say it takes 39 pounds of boost. That just means we're operating here instead of here. This is dependent on the VE of the motor. Okay, so if you can't increase the VE of the motor, you can increase the boost. Okay, if you can increase the VE of the motor, then you can lower the boost. So that's how those two sliders are connected.
Yeah.
Very high VE means we don't need a lot of boost to get the air to go through the motor. Low VE means we have a lot of pressure ratio we need. But as you can see from looking at the map, at the turbo is happy to give you 55 pounds a minute as low as a 2-to-1 pressure ratio. I don't think the VE of the motor is going to let that happen. I think at a 2-to-1 pressure ratio, you're going to probably be stuck more like right here, based on what I know about these motors and your heads, and you know what's going to happen. I think at 14 pounds of boost, you'll be happy to see maybe 800 wheel horsepower.
And I think that would be perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, you know, that's not putting too much boost to the motor, because I obviously want it to live, but that's also a good power number, especially for something that weighs 2,400 pounds that I need to learn how to drive and fine tune. So even if it's, you know, like you said, making 850 at around 14 pounds, that's, you know,
and
that's
that
plenty.
light vehicle weight, that's another reason to put the small ARs on it, okay? Because we're not going to really be able to have weight loading, okay? Like you have 5,000 pound truck like my Tahoe, it's very easy to put enough load on it and get the turbos lit. But when you have something that's super light, like a motorcycle, or you know, like you have 2 motorcycles, basically, is the weight of your car. You have to get the turbine energy in a different way. It's not going to come from load, it's going to come from velocity, and UHF is really good at that, and sizing it this way is going to work out really, really good. So I think what we need to do is I need to go get you a pair of XRC 6264S's with some 63 turbine housings on it. How's that sound?
Sounds pretty good.
Okay.
I'm really excited to see how big they are, like, compared to what I normally see at, obviously, a drag race, because you know, you see everybody who gets like giant 88mm turbos and stuff, and they're just like gigantic, and I know that I need something obviously smaller, so I'm really excited to just see how big they actually
I'll bring one of those big S400 turbos too, so we can sit them side by side.
All right, cool.
I'll be right back. Okay, so these are the XRC 6264S's. The XRC series is a revised for 2024 version of the HTC Aero that gets a shaft speed increase, now rated for 2,100 feet per second tip speed instead of 1,900 feet per second tip speed. So it basically adds one more compressor map line, one more speed line to the compressor map rather. And these are the map we were just looking at. These are our most compact motorsport style turbocharger, and these are in an echo pair configuration so that they counter rotate to each other, so that you're able to install them really kind of sexy, symmetric.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty cool to see them, facing each other like that. The mirror image turbos have always been something that I think are just super cool looking.
It is super cool looking, and I think basically every turbocharger manufacturer in the world just said, "Oh brother," and slapped themselves on the forehead the day that this started to become popular, because you got to take all of your investment in tooling that you've made your whole life, and now you get to do it all over again.
Yeah, I get that.
So it basically just doubles like all the manufacturing costs of everything you want to make. So you don't always see everybody offering a mirror, or in Xona Rotor's case we call it echo pair, in every size. You've kind of got to kind of pick your winners. But Xona Rotor has echo pairs in X3C and X2C and X4C cover applications. So all three sizes of our small frame turbocharger, we are able to build echo pairs in
cool.
with the tile V-band housings to complement them for compact, lightweight installation.
Yeah,
and then these are all the fittings, water fittings, turbo inlet flange and clamp, turbo outlet flange and clamp that you need to go along with those to install those. So I brought those for you too. And for comparative cert purposes, I brought an S400. That's an 85 millimeter S400 turbocharger. And
just like looking at the size,
yeah,
compared to mine, I mean, it's insane how big your guys' turbos can be.
The S400 turbochargers get very large. The S400 is popular in domestic drag racing for sure. I mean, really popular in domestic drag racing. And why is that? Because it's a real cost-effective way to boost a V8 engine. S400 is really good for durability. From a durability perspective, they're made for over-the-road trucks that are going to go hundreds of thousands of miles. Now the downside of that is like they're also made for thicker oil and high zinc content oil and so on and so forth. So you got to really make sure that you're lubricating your S400s correctly, or else you can run into some problems. But you can't just connect a Dash 3 oil feed line to them and feed them like they were a ball bearing turbo. It's not going to work. You need to send them 60 pounds oil pressure. In some cases, you need to send them 60 pounds oil pressure to Dash 6 line. Just depends on how much work you're going to ask them to do. My general rule of thumb is I like to have at least 20 more pounds of oil pressure than I do boost pressure. So if you're running S400 and you're only going to run 10 or 15 pounds of boost, well, great. Well, then, stock bottom end Chevrolet motor that makes a peak of 49 PSI of oil pressure will be fine for that. But if you wanted to run 45 pounds of boost, then no, that's not going to be enough oil pressure. You're definitely going to need to step that up.
I never even thought about that. That's really interesting. Huh.
It's a good rule of thumb to remember. What should my oil pressure be? Well, some guys build these 4.6 modular motors, and they call me up and they're like, I have 140 pounds of oil pressure. And I'm like, seems like a lot, man.
Yeah.
Well, my motors work really good this way. I'm like, well, you don't want to send all of that oil pressure to the turbo, because on an S400, if you send 140 pounds of oil pressure to that turbocharger, it's going to flow a lot of oil. It's got big clearances in it, and a lot of oil is going to go down the drain pipe. You're going to have a lot of work to do as far as draining the oil out of the turbocharger. And like I said, just stick to that 20 PSI more oil pressure than the boost target that you plan on running on S400s, and you'll be safe in most cases.
Cool. So, and yeah, I'm super excited to see these and to actually understand what they fully look like, and like flipping them over and stuff. These things are they're beautiful. Everywhere.
If you look into the exhaust side of it, you can see why I'm saying it's not going to get in the way of your motor. You see this, that sets a large diameter 64 millimeter turbo wheel. Usually in a turbocharger of this frame size, you don't see turbo wheels any bigger than maybe about 62 millimeter. This is 64 millimeter. We can also put 68 millimeter and 69 millimeter turbo wheels in these same exhaust housings. So this is how we get basically this same footprint, that what we call form factor, this same form factor, we have turbochargers that can operate at over 1,000 horsepower per turbo.
Yeah.
Okay, those would be like the XRE 6869S, the XRE 7169S. And they're not any bigger than this. So when you're ready to take your 5.3 out and you want to put a 427 in there, then we can just change the turbos and everything just goes right back together. And now you're making, 900 horsepower on low boost and 1,600 horsepower on high boost.
Maybe one day. Yeah. I mean, that'd be crazy, but I know that these will work perfect for what I'm doing now. And I really appreciate you guys helping me out with it.
That's specifically what we set out to do. We're not planning on like, hey, well, let's get the turbos that we're going to need in 3 years. No, don't ever do that. Okay, get the turbos that fit the application. Get the turbos that fit for what you're doing right now, and enjoy it. Enjoy the best configuration for your project that you have right now while you're doing it. Don't try to put next season's turbochargers on this season's motor, and the same thing with the camshaft. Or converter. You wouldn't put next season's converter in this year's car. You need to have all your parts matched. So I'm glad we had a chance to sit down and go over this really thoroughly and do a real good job of picking the sizes for you.
Yeah, and I'm really excited because these are the turbos that I will run, right?
These are yours. These are
mine?
going with you. These are going with you. Yeah.
So I can't wait to mock these up on the truck and start fabbing up, all of the hot side and the cold side for it, because these will just take the truck to the next level, and I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm excited too, man. I've been a fan of that truck ever since I saw it. I love the Chevy Love trucks, man. I remember riding in the back of a baby blue Chevy Love truck going to Little League ball practice in the 70s, man. It was a different time, but I've loved the Chevy Love trucks, that long. I'll never have one. I'll never make a race truck out of a Chevy Love, but somebody will, and you're the somebody. So what I have here, I have a turbocharger that they lost control of, and it had a runaway shaft speed problem, and the turbo exploded. The turbine wheel exploded specifically. And as you can see, there's not any perforations in the housing. All of the pieces, as they exploded, they were all contained. They're bulges. There's some bulges, but there's no total holes in the inside of the housing. And if you look at the inside of the housing, you can see how much energy was transmitted. Okay, when that there's a little piece of it shoved up in there. Okay, you can see how much energy is in there. And when this turbine wheel explodes, man, I did a calculation one time, and I made some assumptions about the rotational speed and the mass of the turbine. I just kind of a generic calculation, and the energy that's present here is on the order of a 30-06 deer rifle. It's on that level of energy. Okay, so if you think your turbine housing, you can stick a deer rifle in it and shoot the deer rifle, and it won't go through. Okay, well then that's strong enough, and that's the kind of energy that goes on here. But that's just an example of a turbine housing that did contain the stuff when it exploded.
All right, so it has been a couple of days since I was at Force Performance and picked up my turbos, but I thought I'd show you guys where I ended up mocking them up, and I think they're in a pretty cool spot. All I did was make these little circles, attach them, weld them or tack them to the V-bands, put the V-bands on, tacked a little, piece of tubing right there, just to have them, mocked up. But where they are right now allows me to still get a tube in here to run up to a NACA duct that will be in the bedside up there. It allows me to run the exhaust either straight up through the tonneau cover or back out below the coolers and above the diffuser, and allows the hot side to get to the manifold pretty easily, and allows the cold side to come up and basically just run straight like that. So I think this is the spot that these Xonas will end up. I can't thank Robert over at Xona and Force Performance enough for these turbos. Thank you to Xona. Thank you to Force Performance. Thank you to Tile. These turbos will make this truck so much cooler, and I just cannot wait to have them all mounted, spooling up, and be making big power, because This isn't the actual engine that I'll run. This is just a mock-up engine, but this little truck should make at least 1,000, but maybe more.